This is Mandy Weiland. I am with the Upper Midwest Trail Runner Board of Directors. I am the current treasurer, and I am a trail runner from down in southeast Minnesota, near Winona. I live in just next door in Minnesota City. I've been trail running probably for, I don't know, 7, 8 years, something like that. I can't even remember, but I remember when I started, I was kind of taken in by a great group of runners in this area, the Southeast Minnesota Trail Runner Group, and I was able to ask questions of them and never feel awkward about the questions that I asked. They were all very nice and answered my questions, and it was great. But I know a lot of people don't get that. And so tonight we have asked Jake Heggie to come speak with me, and just talk about getting started on trail running. We had some couple questions come in on Facebook, so we'll go over those, and just kind of talk about, you know, there's a lot of people now that are out on the trails that maybe weren't before because of this COVID pandemic. And so we hope to give you just a few tidbits that you can take away. I know every time I talk with Jake or I attend an event that he has, I always take something away from it. He had some trail transformation, came down to Winona and Whitewater, and I participated in those clinics. And just with those 2 clinics, I took away so much great information, and I can actually run up hills now. So that was the best thing that came out of that. And even people who had run trails for 15 years, all took something away from that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jake Heggie. Jake founded Trail Transformation down in La Crosse. I don't even know how long you've been trail running for. Forever, I suppose.
14 years.
14 years, okay.
Yep.
So I'll just let him introduce himself a little bit and, explain what you do, and maybe give us a little bit of what you've had for accolades. I know you've run every distance at Falls Superior and won them all with a course record, actually, in the 50 mile. So why don't you just tell us all about you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So I'm primarily a physical therapist, treating people's aches and pains, injuries, primarily working with runners. And one of the things that I kind of saw from the PT world is that we can do all the rehab, give people the exercises, but unfortunately, whether it's a couple weeks, couple months, or, a year down the road, they come back into the clinic. And it was kind of frustrating because ultimately our goal as a PT is to, get people out the door and continue doing all the sports that they enjoy. Mm-hmm. So we took a look at the training factor, how much is, how much volume they're doing, the intensity, frequency, and kind of coming up with a training plan to help the person transition from, injury, from rehab back to performance. And it really took off. We were able to see, all these people that were just constantly dealing with injuries, soon start to get into a good routine and start challenging themselves at new distances, new paces, setting, PRs, you name it. But then it really kind of started as the trail transformation side of things, because personally, I was dealing with all sorts of injuries back in high school and college, a lot of volume, a lot of intense workouts, and they're really just all of those miles were on the road. And once I kind of broke away from the college scene, I started doing all of my training on the trails, and what do you know, my injuries went away and I was having a lot more fun running. And I actually ended up getting quite a bit faster, even though I wasn't putting in the amount of volume or the intensity, but it was that, that variety that I really enjoyed. And soon enough, I started learning about actual trail races. I was like, wow, people actually run 50Ks, on these trails and cover these cool distances. This is awesome. So I think my first 50K was the Chippewa 50K back in 2012, but I did a bunch of other shorter trail races down in Madison, like Devil's Lake and Blue Mountains. But yeah, I was basically hooked. But one of the things that I kind of saw is there's no easy way on how to learn how to trail run. It's just kind of go out there, trial and error, the food, the how to run the uphills, downhills. But kind of over the years, we've learned some tricks of the trade. And from the PT side of things, what do you need to work on in order to make yourself a better trail runner?
Okay, great, great. So I guess here's the basic question is how should people start trail running? Are there any programs that you would recommend? Is there like a Couch to 5K, or would you recommend time versus distance, or how do you suggest people start, basically just getting out on the trails?
Yeah, so I think it all starts off of what your kind of baseline fitness is. If you're kind of like a 5K road runner, and you want to transition to trails, I would suggest just going to one of your local state parks and doing some easy hikes just to kind of get your legs used to the variety of terrain, getting used to the rocks and roots, the uphills, downhills, because it's a totally different kind of um, muscle activation versus running on the flat pavement. And then once you start to feel comfortable just hiking those trails, you can start adding in a little run walk, maybe running for 2 minutes, walking for 2 minutes up to that, 5K distance. I wouldn't suggest, doing from your 5K trail or road run to, a half marathon on the trail. It's a pretty significant jump because we know that, 5K on the road can sometimes, or a 5K on the trail can sometimes take twice as long as a 5K on the road.
Right.
So really just kind of getting the feel for the trail first is one of the biggest things, because it is a totally different kind of muscle use. And obviously people are worried about spraining their ankles or tripping and falling. By kind of going through those routes, checking out those trails, what to expect versus, oh, I'm going to go run. Oh, didn't know there was a bunch of rocks here. You get a little bit of a lay of the land before you actually start running on it.
Right. And you bring up a point that I wasn't aware of when I started trail running, is trail running takes a lot longer than it does running on the road. I remember going on a couple of trips with Southeast Minnesota over near the Rochester area thinking, oh, we're just going to go run a 5K, have a beer, and then going to go home. I should be home in, an hour and a half, 2 hours. Well, a 5K on the trail could take you an hour to an hour and a half, so that was one thing that I didn't know. I didn't know any difference. So that's a good point for people to know that it's going to take you much longer.
Yeah. So, I mean, going off of that, I did about 4 miles on the road this morning. And it took me 28 minutes. So 7-minute pace. And then I did 4 miles this afternoon in the Bluffs, and it took me 49 minutes. So, 21 minutes longer.
Right.
Obviously there were some hills involved, but just totally different kind of terrain. And that's where when starting the trail side of things, don't go off the distance side of it. Duration's a lot easier. I'm going to go for a 30-minute trail run because you don't know how technical, how hilly that trail might be. Versus, if you tell yourself 3 miles and it takes you an hour and you're running late, it can be kind of frustrating. But
Right.
Let go of the pace and just kind of focus on the duration.
Right. And another thing that I didn't know right away is you can walk up hills.
Yes.
Yeah. I think my first trail race that I did, I thought I'm gonna run up every hill. I'm gonna run up every hill, and I did, and I died. But that's one thing that I try to tell people when they ask me about starting trail running is, yes, you can walk up the hills. And maybe that's why I like trail running more than I like road running, because I get to walk up the hills and the difficult parts. So I like that. We did have one question on Facebook. Mary Lubke says, with all the elevation trails can offer, is it dumb to run up the hills early on? Do you just run everything until you can't?
A lot of it depends on how steep the hill is. Is it just kind of a gradual incline, or is it, running straight up a 500-foot bluff? How long is the event that you're doing? Is it a 5K or is it, a marathon? And just kind of what your experience with hills are. I'd say play it a little bit more on the conservative side of, take it out easier, walking, or I wouldn't even call it walking. Power hiking might be a better term, right? Kind of pushing the pace.
Walking with a purpose is what
There
we.
you go. I like it. So, pushing the pace a little bit on those uphills, but you're going to expend a lot more energy trying to run them. And if you conserve it early on, you're going to be able to hopefully push a little bit more later on in the race. I mean, any 100-miler that I've ever done, I walk the uphills. I want to make sure I can actually run the flats and the downhills later. I know it's not worthwhile, trying to push the uphills. And something that a lot of people don't realize is power hiking is a skill in itself. I mean, you can see some people that are way faster power hiking or, walking with a purpose than running up a hill. So sometimes I'll even program that in for people. If we're going to go to a steep hill and I just want you to power hike up and, do an easy recovery jog down. It's not a sprint up. It's, truly develop your power hiking skills.
Right. A funny story on that. Hickson a couple years ago, I think it was the real muddy year. I did the first loop, and then the second loop I was kind of injured, so I pretty much power hiked the whole thing. I actually did that loop faster than I did my first loop.
Yeah, and it was significantly more muddy that second loop too.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So yeah.
But yeah, power hiking is definitely a skill in itself.
Yes. Yes, it is. So what would be some basic gear that someone just starting out trail running would need?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of trail running. All you really need is, some clothes and shoes. We get the question all the time, do I need trail shoes? No, you don't, but it sure makes a heck of a difference. From a confidence standpoint, having some shoe that has the traction to grab onto the dirt or the grass or a rock versus, something that's smooth and you might just go sliding. Especially, if that trail is just kind of has like a little bit of a kind of greasy layer on top, you're going to go flying. And yeah, you can get away with the road shoes, but the trail shoes, they're built differently from a durability standpoint too. The upper material is quite a bit more well designed, so you're not going to bust through the sides, especially if you are, running, corners or jumping over rocks and roots, down hills, making sure that you have something that's actually going to last.
Yeah, especially if you're jumping over the rocks like Jake Heggie does on Superior Hiking Trail. We did have one question from Mike Walentine. He asked about shoes. Any recommendations for trail running shoes for a newbie? I usually run in a very low weight running shoe, but they are not very useful for trail running. So do you have?
So I was actually just having this conversation with one of our PTs the other day. Shoes have obviously changed significantly over the years, kind of going from, maximum stability to minimalist to maximalist, and who knows where it's at now. It's actually to, the spring-loaded Nike stuff, right?
Right, yeah.
But ultimately finding something that's comfortable. Hokas are, really comfortable shoes, but they're not going to work for everyone. Ultras are awesome because they have a little bit wider toe box. They give you a little bit more feel for the ground. But some people might, really be a diehard fan of Nike, so they just switch over to the Nike version. And some of these trail shoes are basically like road shoes with, just traction on them. But I would highly recommend going to one of your specialty shoe stores, going through the fit process. 3 things that I actually used to work at the running store here in La Crosse. 3 things that we would always say are the heel. Does it feel kind of nice and snug so it's not sliding around? The arch, does it feel supported, but, not too much where it's shifting your foot to the outside, or, nothing at all where your foot's just, pronating or collapsing in. And then the toes, is there enough wiggle room? You don't want something that's going to be compressed, but you also don't want something that you're just kind of sliding around in the forefoot. So those big things, the heel, the arch, and the toes, and putting on those shoes, even putting one on the left, one on the right, take it for a spin around the block and just see which one feels more comfortable. And that's the tough thing. I've even changed my shoes significantly over the year. I used to be in the Montrails way back when, then I was in Saucony, now I'm in Hoka's, and now I'm kind of going back to some Sauconys and dabble in some Salomon. But that's kind of the nice thing, is the variety. And once you really get into the trail running side of things, you'll want different shoes depending on the terrain. You know, what you wear for a bike trail race versus a superior hiking trail race could be totally different.
Right.
So yeah, just add more shoes to the closet.
Right. And it could depend on the time of the year too. So if you're running
Yes.
trails in the winter time, you'll want something probably that's maybe waterproof or something to protect your feet from the cold elements, right? Yeah.
I would highly suggest just going to the running store, trying out all the different brands, and kind of narrowing it down to the comfort, the heel, the arch, and the toes.
Okay. What about hydration on the trails?
Ooh, I'm terrible about that one. Since trail running does take a little bit longer, I always try to run with a water bottle for anything over an hour, just because you're going to be sweating a lot more than you think when you're out there, especially with how hot and humid it's been lately.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing with trail races is it's not as, or trail events in general, is it's not as fast paced. So, it's okay to slow down, take a few sips of water along the way, and then keep going. It's not like you're running a 5K where they give you those little Dixie cups of 2 ounces, and that's not enough to actually hydrate you.
Right.
But it's one of those things. In weather like this, you should be drinking pretty frequently.
So do you prefer the handheld, or do you use a pack, or how do you carry your water?
Yeah, so I made the mistake 2 weeks ago when we were up in the UP. My very first run, I threw my pack on without a shirt, and I got some nasty chafing on the back. So, I should have known, but it's been a while since I've worn it. I like the handheld for anything, 1 to 2 hours, but over that, I'll switch over to the vests. And the vests have come such a long ways. They used to, bounce, and, the water would just the bladder would move all over the place. The zippers weren't very efficient, but now, like, you hardly even know you're wearing anything.
Right.
So for anything long distance, especially if you're, exploring new territory, having the vest to put your phone in, some extra food, maybe even one of the soft flasks in the front for, an electrolyte drink of some sort. The vests are pretty handy. But if you know that you are just going, for an hour or so, the handheld is totally fine. But yeah, practicing with it before any sort of big event is also very important to make sure it fits, and just how it feels and how to access things.
Right, and where it's going to rub, so you can put some body glide there, so you don't get that chafing. Yeah. And I've had a lot of different kind of vests. You have the Nathan vests and all sorts of different things. Some cover your whole back, some just are on the top, and I'm actually now in an orange mud pack with the 2 bottles. And yeah, so I really like that one. It allows me to have 2 different things, so I can have water in one and tailwind in another, and then switch.
You feel like you're able to reach those pretty good?
Yeah. I mean, they're like right about here is all you got to reach for.
Okay.
And I thought I was going to have a problem with the swishing of the water right behind my ears, but eventually you don't even notice it there anymore. So, and it's got big pockets. And so, speaking about food, sticking the food in your pocket. So what's your go-to, or what would you recommend someone starting trail running take with them, or how much would you need to take with?
Yeah, kind of going back to, if you're out exploring some new territory, having a little bit of extra snacks. I'm a huge advocate of real food, so I might pack like a peanut butter and jelly or banana or an apple or something. I've had some experiences with goos and gels going bad on me in the past, and my stomach just can't really tolerate them anymore. But there's a lot of fancy, like, those little chews.
Mm-hmm.
Those seem to go pretty well.
Yeah.
But I find the real
honey stingers.
honey stinger.
Mm-hmm.
There's the waffles. There's so many options out there now to get some quick calories, and they're obviously pretty compact, and you can store a bunch of them. But making sure same thing, that you're experimenting with it prior to going on those runs. I've seen some people, unfortunately, that have had some sort of allergic reaction or sensitivity to it. So making sure you're reading the ingredients before you pack it. There might be some sort of tree nut or some sort of allergy in there. So making sure you're reading that ahead of time. But and then obviously, you can get your calories in the form of the fluid as well. If you're looking at Tailwind or, Gatorade, Powerade, you name it, there's all sorts of options out there.
Yeah, the one thing I love in races is pickles. Pickles. Is like my favorite. So, yeah.
Yes.
It helps me get my salt, and yeah, it's easy to eat, and my stomach just really takes it well. So I know there's some other things that watermelon. I cannot eat watermelon when I'm in a race. And so, yeah, it's about trying things out, making sure that you can tolerate whatever it is you're going to take with you. So I always, like our big final last trail run before a race, we'll take exactly what we're going to eat, and usually I like to be self-sufficient. So I know that I want a this and a this and a this. I'm going to just carry it with me because I'm a back of the packer. I'm not going to be winning any races. So I can sit at the aid station for a couple of minutes and pull out my sandwich and carry it with me and stuff. So that's what I prefer to do.
For sure.
Yeah.
And our dietitian, Rachel, would give me a hard time, but for my kind of race fueling side of things, I never really go into it with a specific plan because there's sometimes just so many variables, of is it going to be hot that day? How is your stomach going to handle one thing? And, those plans can go south, but having backup plans and just ultimately, practicing through experiment on the training runs of what your body can handle. Pickles are a big one for me, but sometimes they might not hit the spot. So what I'll do, like in a race prior to getting to an aid station, is what does my body need? Think about it. And then you get to the aid station, like I need this, versus you get sometimes to that aid station, it's just a smorgasbord of all sorts of things and you get overwhelmed. Do you need something salty? Do you need, carbs? Do you need, a lot of calories, or, just a couple things? Do you even need to stop? But that's where, being, like you said, self-sufficient, always having something that you at least know works well for you kind of in your arsenal as well.
Sure. Now, salt is a big thing for people. And I know some people take those salt tablets. Was that anything that you would recommend for beginners to use?
Yeah, salt tablets, have some benefit. There's a lot of debate out there of, do they actually help or is it placebo effect? Obviously pickles, can play a huge role too. Pickle juice. I think there's like companies that literally just specialize in selling pickle juice,
right?
But that stuff works. So there's definitely, science behind it, but it comes down to kind of experimenting. What does your body need? I wouldn't, recommend taking, 2 salt tabs every hour if you've never had, issues with cramping or, know that you have a, salt deficiency. But, if you're a heavy salter or heavy sweater, you might need to supplement with salt during the race.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to use them and I didn't notice any difference. So I just taken them. So I always have the problem, my hands swell immensely when I run, anything over about 10 miles. My hands get really swollen. And of course, I've heard all sorts of things. You have too much fluid, not enough fluid, too much salt, not enough salt, more potassium, not enough potassium. So I gave those salt tablets a try. They didn't really work for me, so I just quit.
And that's a real problem is, that there is that swelling, and I've had it in some races where I don't get any swelling, and some same thing, like my hand will get swollen. I can feel my, watch and my ring getting tighter. It's like, what's going on? Like, oh yeah, I had a bunch of salt at that last aid station.
Right. Yeah. And I know a lot of people use salt for cramping. And so we had another question from Mary on Facebook. She said, when you cramp and start to fall apart at 25 miles, even if you're conservative and nice to your legs, what do you do to somehow refresh, keep going to 50 or 100 miles? So this is probably not a beginner question, but.
Yeah. It kind of gets into some like deeper physiology, neurology side of things of like, if you tell your brain that you have to cover, 26 miles, mentally you're going into it, right? I'm going to run 26 miles. Your body is kind of prepped and ready to go for that distance where, towards the end, it might, start fatiguing quite a bit. But if you were to go to, telling yourself, oh, I have 50 miles, your body just has this way of like subconsciously kind of prepping it and making it able to make sure it can safely travel that distance. Obviously, there's a huge training effect to all of this as well, but I mean, how do we train for 100 miles? It's not like we're going out there and doing 70, 80-mile training runs, but mentally at the start of that race, you're like, I'm going to do 100 miles, and training wise, I may have done some 20, 30, 40, maybe a 50-mile race as a tune-up, but it's just you're kind of mentally telling yourself, okay, here's the distance I have to travel. There are some interesting articles, like it's a central governor theory, basically, of like your brain is subconsciously ready to tackle these events, which is why people can also do crazy 200-mile events.
Right.
And
Yep.
It's like, how does that work from a physiology standpoint, right? How do you truly get your body physically ready for that?
Right. Yeah. So how about a beginner trail racer? How do they start to train for maybe a half marathon on the trail? As the distance is longer, would you recommend some different different types of training, or do you just get out on the trails and that's it?
Yeah. So, coming from your background, if you're, an experienced trail or road runner that has had, experience with speed, and you're looking to set, a faster time, then you can kind of sprinkle in some speed workouts. But if you're truly just looking to, complete that distance, it's safe to, increase the frequency of runs. If you're doing 4 days a week, you can up it to 5 days a week, maybe even adding in an additional day of cross training. And then start to slowly increase the duration of one of those long runs. Something I'm a really big fan of is like back-to-back long runs. So let's say you're training for a trail half marathon. Some people might get up to 11 or 12 miles for their long run. Another way to kind of do it is, what if you were to do maybe 9 miles on a Saturday and 8 miles on a Sunday? You get some pretty good training effects, but you don't have to quite go as far to get the same as far in that one effort, which you see kind of depletes your energy levels a little bit more, right? Are you really going to do 12-mile long run for a 13-mile race?
Right. Yeah.
You risk a little bit more overtraining or injury that way. It's a little bit safer to kind of break it up between two distances.
Sure. And then you get the training on the kind of the tired legs too. So then you have
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, are there any trails in this area that you would highly recommend maybe for a beginner trail runner?
Yeah, yep. So a lot of the stuff in Upper Hickston can be fairly technical. It's primarily mountain bike single track, but all of the stuff in Lower Hickston that we have is fairly simple. It's a little bit wider. There's a service road that you can run on. And if you really wanted to get adventurous, you can, practice your walking with a purpose, up one of the bluffs. So there's some options there. Obviously, Perot State Park up in Trempealeau is another beautiful trail, and they have some really kind of beginner trails lower as well. But then, up by you, Holzinger has the lower rollers, which is, a little bit easier.
And the salad bar, but that's probably where I would send a beginner.
Just go up and down that twice during the early November with some snow on it, right?
Yeah. I also like Whitewater. Whitewater is one of my favorites. If you're looking for a little bit less technical, the Trout Run, I think that's the Trout Run Trail. So that's pretty flat, and it'll take you it's a out and back. But then you can also, on that trail is Inspiration Point. If you want to do a few stairs, you can get up and see the total, like the whole valley. So that one's really cool. So I would recommend that one for for beginners, and then also out at Great River Bluffs State Park is also a great one for beginners
Yeah,
as
there's
well.
lots of easy rollers out there and some really cool overlooks for sure.
All right, you're cutting out just a little bit here. All right. I did have one other question on Facebook, and I don't know, this must be an inside joke, but what's the best place for a trail nap?
Top of Carlton Peak, hands down.
Okay. That must have been a superior.
It was my the second time I attempted the 50 miler. Went out way too hard, crashed and burned, and hiking up the peak, my heart rate was through the roof. I thought I was going to pass out. So took a little snooze to recharge.
Perfect.
And then, of course, you know, I started doing that in other races, you know, after that. So
Sure. Whatever works.
Yep.
All right. So what is next for you? I know there's not much happening these days. So do you have any, I know a lot of people are doing maybe FKTs, you know, fastest known times through trails, anything in the
Yeah, so my whole calendar is clear now. Voyager is supposed to be next weekend. That's not happening. And then I was going to do the Superior 100, and just with all the unknowns, I decided to actually pull out of that one. So I'm actually going to give the full Superior Hiking Trail a go in early October. So I know it was just set about a month ago, but I'm going to get after it.
It was Brittany and
Brittany and Cody, yeah.
Yeah. And they beat somebody who had just did it like couple weeks before that.
Like a week before or something like that. Yeah. So thankfully I have you know, Austin in my court. He's you know, he had it last year, so kind of pick his brain on some things to work on, and you know, gonna go up there a couple times to do some course recon. So
are you gonna go southbound then? Start at the north and go south? Yeah. Okay. You just cut out again. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to probably go up in September and do about 70 miles on there, but we're going to actually just hike and camp. We're not going to run it. So like one of my favorite places on this planet. So yes, I can't wait to get up there. Anything else that you would suggest for, you know, beginners?
Yeah, just get out there and have fun. You know, it's a new experience. Don't worry about the pay side of things. And don't be afraid to, you know, check out some new places too. If, you know, that's kind of one of the beauties of trail running, is it takes us to some really cool places that we normally don't get to go to. So, you know, if you see a steep climb, go up it. There might be a cool overlook at the top. You know, if you see a trail that goes, you know, a little bit further back into the woods, you know, there could be a cool cave or waterfall or something. So that's one of the unique things with trail running, is it takes us to places people normally don't get to.
Yes. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I thank you for joining us. So I do want to put a plug in for the Upper Midwest Trail Runner group. So $20 to join the group, and that gives you all sorts of great benefits. We do have lots of discounts for different stores around the area. Running Warehouse, TC Running, Duluth Running, Gear West, Mill City Running. So all of those places give really great discounts to UMTR members. We have great resources for different local running groups. We normally would have our race series, which of course is canceled for this year. We've done a couple of virtual events, so you can participate in those for free, some badass events, and the annual banquet will not be in person, but we will be doing something. So, and like I said, it's only $20, and that's an annual membership. We are also looking for board members for 2021. If anyone is interested, you can go to our website and just email any of the board members. So I want to thank you again, Jake, for being with us tonight and giving us some great tips for beginning trail running.
Thanks for having me. Hope to see you guys out on the trail sometime soon.
Yes. All right. Thank you.